everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we have a video that aims to give you the leg up in matchups that you might be struggling with. We're actually going to cover every hero in the game today, as each one brings with it a unique set of challenges to overcome. Now obviously all the examples are described from the perspective of a good player playing these heroes against you, because obviously in the wrong hands any hero can be easy to deal with. Because of that, we're going to use pro players and streamers footage in the background, as they're the players who most often represent the highest level of individual hero play and therefore are good examples of what you might be struggling against. All the relevant links to the players' streams will be in the description, not only as a form of credit, please do be sure to check out their channels and support them obviously, but also as a great source for you guys if you want to learn from them in the positive sense on the heroes they specialize in. Now this video will explain how to counter, but not have specific examples, as the knowledge base is actually what will help you as you progress. If you have further struggles with any hero mentioned today, let us know in the comment section down below and we can make separate videos explaining specific interactions with examples. With all that said, let's crack on as there's a lot to get through. Diva. The best way to counter Diva is to read what type of Diva you're playing against and exploiting their playstyle. Low ranked Divas are easily popped out of mech by overstaying their welcome quite often. If you notice a Diva is going too aggressive on your side of the fight, don't flank, and instead focus her with things like Roadhog Hook, Zarya Beam on high charge, freezing her through her DM with Mei, or go for critical hits with heroes that have fairly easy abilities to land like Reaper or Hanzo Storm Arrow. Those can all pop her out of her mech quite quickly. Against a better Diva though, one who seemingly never gets demech'd and always has defense matrix ready, you can use a technique the pros call juggling the Diva, where if you flank the support backline and the Diva peels back to help, recognize that pulling her attention towards you creates openings elsewhere. The trick of course is getting away with your life as she chases you, but when done well, it can minimize the impact of a Diva and force her to choose which end of the fight to protect. Remember, defense matrix gets more value if all the damage is coming from one direction, so shooting her and her team in the back is key. Good heroes to employ this playstyle with in the current meta would be Sombra, Doomfist, Genji, or even Wrecking Ball. Arisa. A huge misconception with facing an Arisa is that teams think they're supposed to focus her shield. However, you can only do that if A, your team is in agreement that's what you're going to do and somewhat coordinate burning it down, and B, your team has good shield break to begin with. Roadhog's ult fire, Bastion, Hanzo, and Junkrat all can shred barriers, but be warned, diverting your fire into a barrier rather than hitting actual enemy health is partially what a tank wants. If you're noticing that Arisa barrier keeps dropping, but she's always able to fortify away and place a new one in time, try to figure out what your team is doing. Either everyone needs to focus fire to fully burn through both barriers she has on deck, or what we think is often just better, beat her with mobility. The map may not always allow for this, but Arisa's biggest weakness isn't you shooting her shield, but bypassing it completely. Remember, it can't move unless she decides to redeploy it. The simplest way to do that is to use Zarya, Rein, Lucio, press forward, and when Arisa puts down a new barrier and Halt is on cooldown, pop Lucio's speed and get the entire team past the barrier into a brawl, either to focus squishies attempting to bunker, or even focusing the Arisa herself. If this fails, you may also need either a Diva instead, or in addition to the Zarya, because often these bunker comps also contain some serious damage dealers like Junkrat spamming down your team, and if you either can't deny the damage or can't play fast enough, your team can get shredded before getting in the close range brawl you're looking for. The other option is to flank, which depending on the map, you may be able to send Genji, Tracer, Pharmacy, or Hanzo along with mobility tanks behind the bunker to pressure it from two fronts. Bunker is strong when played into. Exploit the fact that it sacrifices adaptability to do so. Rein. There are two ways to deal with Rein. Either exploit his immobility and kill his team, or target him directly. At most elos, targeting Rein will be the easiest route, as most Reins don't really know how to handle a lot of pressure put on them. This can be done either with damage, displacement, or disable, aka most of the abilities that are really good in the current meta. Hanzo or Junkrat can work down his shield quickly before he closes the distance. Sombra, Doomfist, Wrecking Ball, and Brig all either disable or displace him. Often, Rein players don't have Lucios and are forced to waste their shields before fights are committed, so all you need to do is spam towards him and crack his shield before he can swing into your team. As an example, Arisa bunker comps easily break his shield and crowd control him with halts, but this won't work versus good death ball play sped up by a Lucio. In that case, you'll need to use mobile heroes who can either bypass his shield or simply get behind him. Farah is one of the best because she can manipulate Rein's positioning with concussive blast and shoot rockets past the shield towards his team or down onto the Rein himself. In the same vein, all the dive tanks and mobile DPS can exploit his slow play. Any DPS playing greedily and flanking constantly can force a Rein player to switch to Winston, so to punish the Rein deathball, get behind with Genji to farm Blade, or even play for greedy greedy flanks with Hanzo because Reinhardt comps will lack the resources to punish aggressive positioning. Roadhog. If Hog is flanking a lot, Ana's sleep can punish him from peeking aggressively, and anti-nade can secure a kill on him as he tries to escape while taking a breather. Reaper farms Roadhog up close, but don't take that duel lightly. You'll have to time Wraith form to dodge his hook, or else he can burst you down. Remember, Diva can defense matrix through teammates at range, so sometimes letting them get hooked and saving them afterwards is a good call. Brig's armor pack can save teammates, but she also has a surprising amount of dueling capability against the 600 HP monster. With a barrier to block hooks, a stun to cancel his heal, and enough damage and self-heal, she can outright win the 1v1. Not to mention, rally armor hurts spread damage badly. Lastly, you can take your pick of the ranged DPS and heals, unless he gets crafty with flanks. Long-range heroes like Zenyatta, Farah, Widow, and Hanzo will largely go uncontested by Hog if they can keep out of hook range. Remember, the biggest risk of a Hog pick is what it lacks in comparison to other picks. If picked as an off-tank with no Diva, a Farah pick can go uncontested. If picked as a DPS, their team will lack ranged firepower, so as long as you outplay the hook, your team damage should be higher. We do think Hog is key versus Doomfist and decent against Sombra, who is often paired with Doom, but bar high percentage hooks on flanker type situations, he's typically a poor pick and is very exploitable. His impending changes coming to the PTR at some point may require some adjustment in how you play against him, but as they're currently not known, we can't offer any constructive help. They are unlikely to change him fundamentally though. Winston. One pitfall in trying to counter a good Winston is most of his harsh counters are easily countered themselves. Reaper, Bastion, and Roadhog all make your team easily countered in turn, so they aren't always a viable answer, even if they indeed will either burst or deter the Winston. For a straightforward answer that doesn't require you to overcompensate your team comp, the combo of Ana and Brigita can be too much for him to handle. But great Winstons can still outplay it if they know how to space against Brigita and bubble off Ana's line of sight. If so, consider Lucio, who is the best way to support more stable picks to not get farmed by a Winston. Lucio can boop Winston back or out of the safety of his bubble, speed teammates away from the monkey's chase, or even speed onto Winston to punish him together by quickly entering his bubble and focusing him down. For DPS options, depending on the map, consider Doomfist, Junkrat, Tracer, and Torbjorn, who either have the durability, damage, utility, or speed to deal with Winston and are still good against most other picks in this meta. Hammond. Good Wrecking Ball players are quite rare at the moment, but over time you may run into a few. Remember that he is the most lethal dive tank with the highest burst potential, but also the highest escape potential. Try to notice if the enemy Hammond keeps escaping. If so, catching the dive might not be the right call. In fact, Hammond is far weaker at defending his team against aggression than he is to getting crowd controlled, because unless his engages are bad, his speed and durability can still outplay slow anti-dive play. A good Wrecking Ball would actually prefer to exploit a slow Brigita Rhine comp rather than be forced to defend against a Tracer Genji full dive. Hammond needs static targets to land pile driver into to get his biggest value, and most heroes with good crowd control are indeed slow and diveable themselves. This may come as a surprise, but pile driver is actually one of the most effective ways to focus down Brigita in the entire game, dealing 100 damage if you hit her and crowd controlling her up for focus fire. Also, Hammond's self shield protects at least against her damage, so unlike most of the dive tanks, Hammond can face tank a bit after getting shield bashed. Still, good Hammond play isn't very common yet, so catching him probably will work for a while. Use Sombra in a defensive posture, lurking while invisible to hack him as he comes in, or stack multiple crowd control threats together to stop his dives dead in their tracks. McCree, May, Doomfist, Roadhog, and the tank bust of Reaper can all be effective. But if that stops working, instead consider mobile heroes, who are difficult to pile driver and will really leave his team wanting for a Winston or a Diva who have crucial abilities to help the team survive when peeling for the backline. Zarya. We've made an entire video about Zarya recently, and I'll shortly recap here. There's a huge misconception that she counters Diva, which is only true if the Diva doesn't exploit the fact that she can fly every 5 seconds and avoid fighting Zarya to instead fight the rest of her team, especially by exploiting high ground. Both Winston and Diva are considered hard counters to Zarya, as you simply let her take whatever space she wants, waiting patiently without peeking or taking poke damage, then look to deny flanks or punishing anything else that gets split off. As well, Diva is always a serious threat to eat Graviton's surge. Other hero counters would include those who can play with Winston Diva. Mobility DPS like Doomfist, Genji, Tracer, and Sombra all outpace her, with Sombra probably the strongest, as she can choose to chain hack her to disrupt a grav setup from ever landing. Lucio can help rush the team past her and crowd control her out of the fight. The other option is range damage. Again, exploiting her lack of mobility, all range characters can stay away from her effective range, and as long as they can avoid spamming into her barriers, and when you do that, even Junkrat counters Zarya, as you can put down more damage from afar than their healers can heal. But for an easier time avoiding giving her all that extra charge, look to accurate heroes like Widow and Hanzo who can time carefully landed headshots on her from a safe distance. Also, Farah can go uncontested without a Diva to stop her, so if you time your rockets around Zarya's bubbles, she's little more than a walking punchback for Farah to farm. Last point, we all know Zarya's grav can secure fights, but it's also underrated to just outplay it with positioning, especially since the radius was nerfed. So we'd always suggest being sure to play mobility split against Zarya, rather than expecting a sound barrier or transcendence to save you in a graviton. But those defensive ults are sometimes necessary, especially if the map is a bit too close quarters to avoid it with positioning. Just keep in mind all the things that can still kill you in those respective ults. If the enemy plays right, it's certainly possible to simply bring too much firepower for a defensive ult to stop. Especially look out for big burst damage like Diva Bomb, Meteor Strike, or massive sustained damage like Farah's Barrage or Hanzo's Dragons that can out DPS support ults when set up or coordinated properly. Bastion. Playing Bastion well takes a team effort, so outplaying one also takes some teamwork. Remember, Bastion when set up melts any barrier or tank in its way, so whatever tank you pick isn't going to hold up long to buy you much time. Because of this, Diva is really the only go-to option, as you can at least guarantee 2 seconds of infinite damage denial, of which you'll want to save until your team is ready to commit. We have a full video on how pros counter the pirate ship Bastion strat that you'll want to watch, but in short, don't play around your own barrier, because it will be gone in seconds. Instead, split up, flank, and swarm the Bastion from multiple angles. Roadhog can flank and hook it, but that's tricky. Also consider getting an angle with Arisa to halt Bastion away from his team, or at least off the cart, or Mei can actually put up her walls either directly in front of the Bastion's line of sight, which makes her probably the best straight up initiator type tank for the job while you surround it, or you can wall from underneath the Bastion, lifting him up above an Arisa shield to be focused from range. Also, when Mei eventually gets ult, it should guarantee clearing him off the cart. Other options include Reaper, who can flank and burst him, Sombra, whose hack and EMP can remove him from turret form, Junkrat or Hanzo, who have mid-range burst damage to take him down, or even Ana, as her big debuff abilities are devastating if she lands them. But just like a DPS, you'll have to try and flank the setup as well, rather than try to heal your team from the infinite damage coming towards them. Realistically, just about everyone has to flank from different angles like you're playing quick play, or to clear it off with a big ult combo like EMP Diva Bomb, or initiate with Dragon Strike right on top of it, making space for your team to swarm it. Doomfist. Doomfist is at the height of his power right now, despite his recent damage fall off nerf, and will take over games if a team isn't prepared for it. A problem you will face is that although a hero like McCree has a flashbang to punish Doom, he is also an immobile, diveable target, and with Doom's recent shield buff, you have to be a very strong McCree to kill him before he lands all his abilities and kills you. Instead, consider Roadhog, even if you have to play 3 tanks single healer, whatever. If you're dying to Doom and nobody will swap, a hog pick from literally any slot on the team can be the determining factor to deny his ability to take over the game. Hog, just like McCree, can get outplayed, but it takes a ton more effort to do so. Ideally, you'd want to stun him before his abilities land to deny his shields from activating. Alternatively, you can hide a Sombra and wait for him to dive your team and hack him before he escapes. A similar ambush playstyle can work with Reaper, who if you time Wraith form to dodge a rocket punch insta-kill, Reaper's self-heal and big damage can punish him from coming in too close. This also requires the Doom to play more aggro because of how much Reaper can freely farm tanks. Many look to Brigita to counter Doom, but remember, Doom is also one of the only DPS that can truly go toe-to-toe with a Brig, so a good Doom won't consider her a counter pick. Another option is to take it to the skies with a Pharmacy. If you can hit mid-air shots as he flies in the sky, you can go at him directly, but otherwise you can try to ignore the Doom and try to deal damage faster than he can. Tracer or Genji may also try this, but Doom can win those 1v1s, so look out. One last major tip is to remember Doomfist has almost no ranged poke. He's a massive dive in, burst, get out hero, so the assumed crutch of needing a lot of heals actually doesn't do anything to stop his insta-kills if he's winning the skill battle. Moira won't be helpful unless she perfectly dodges him with Fade and you have another answer for him. Keep Lucio and Mercy in mind because both of them fare best to avoid him entirely, to let your team fight him if your movement is good. Ana can work, but you almost have to land sleep darts reliably. Genji. Genji truly is the jack of all trades DPS in this meta, because if the player is good enough, no matchup truly is against him if he plays it right, especially considering surviving as a nuisance until you farm Blade is a common pro strategy. To combat this, you can go one of 2 ways about it. Send dive tanks like Winston and Diva at him relentlessly to force him off of the flanks, but again, if he plays to sustain until he builds Blade, this only works so far. Instead, picking DPS heroes that have a more of a direct effect on his support line can work. Genji has the potential to win any duel and keep himself alive for a long time fine when played perfectly, but he's not great at peeling or denying space, so heroes that ignore him to kill his backline like Tracer, Farah, Doomfist and Sombra can work there. With his healers dead, dive tanks can finish him off, but if you prefer to try and play in a peel-focused defensive way, McCree, Soldier, Torbjorn, Mei and Reaper all have a shot, but the principle remains in Overwatch that slow heroes often will need the aid of a Lucio to not get out-positioned and swarm themselves. Also important is to always account for his blade and the various combos that help it. Nano Boost or even a Mercy Pocket can burst through Transcendence, so Sound Barrier is a bit more viable and can buy time to escape without giving him dash resets. But also consider these other best escapes from the blades such as Zarya's Bubbles, Reaper's Wraith Form or Mei's Cryo Freeze, which all can drain precious seconds off the blade's duration. Hanzo. With Hanzo's rework, he's a top tier DPS and when hitting a lot of shots can carry the game. You'll want to exploit his slight mobility disadvantage and look to commit when Storm Arrow is on cooldown. Farah and Genji are best to duel him despite those duels being closer than it was in the past. Even so, Hanzo is fairly slow, so they can land reliable shots on him and use their superior mobility to corner him. Widow on maps like Ruins theoretically can win the battle, but he may be too nimble for you to lock down if your Widow aim isn't up to snuff on other maps. Hanzo with his new balance is sort of the best of all worlds now, as he can dish out insta-kills with accuracy but also can easily spam down tanks, so Winston and Diva may not be as easy to simply chase him as you'd think, unless he makes a mistake. The best tank counter is Wrecking Ball, as he's hard to hit as he flies in, and the big boon of health from Adaptive Shield can outweigh the power of Storm Arrow, and importantly, Wrecking Ball's hitboxes are harder to crit than Winston or Diva's. Also, if your team is getting picked off at range, consider a Mercy, even if her healing values are lower, as the res can undo a lucky shot. Also, she pairs great with Farah or Widowmaker. Farah gains a substantial advantage from damage amp, making the rocket splash damage become more lethal, and with damage amp, Widowmaker's scope requires less charge to be lethal, allowing her to peek and shoot much more quickly. Doomfist is an option as well, as if your movement is good enough, a Hanzo can struggle to hit you before you land the kill. Junkrat. It's often not just Junkrat that's the problem, but the team comps that he plays in. For example, most players know that if Junk's spamming you, you can go Zarya to get a lot of free energy. Only problem is, if the enemy have too much range damage and the Rhine Shield and Zarya Bubbles are getting blasted through, a high ground Arisa can hold everyone together for free, and Junkrat can build Riptire in about half a second. Because of this, consider either replacing your off-tank or DPS with Diva, who can eat Arisa's halt and Junk spam as you try to close the distance. The key thing to remember is that Junk deals damage without having to look at you, so when you're on the low ground or in a choke, slow heroes with low mobility will simply die for free to the spam until you get the better angles or high ground to fight him. Because of this, heroes like Farah, Tracer and Genji are key, as they can access flank routes to get past where Junk is strong, kill his team where he can't defend them, or outright get an angle on him. Also consider sniper flanks with Widow's grapple or Hanzo's wall climb, especially on the alleyway of Jardio or other maps like that. Beyond that, Lucio's speed boost is basically a must pick versus Junk spam, because without it, his shots get a lot easier to hit and you're far more likely to lose your Rhine Shield before getting anywhere, resulting in a lost fight. If you have a death ball, you must have a Lucio versus Junk spam, but if not, have everyone play mobility heroes and jump past the spam to take the fight to a more favoured location. Junk is strong against every tank technically, but not when they take the fight somewhere he doesn't want to be, namely an open space where he can get surrounded. McCree. McCree tapping heads can take over a game, however he's also the most brittle hero Overwatch has to offer, so countering him shouldn't be hard unless you're actually playing versus Pine. Even after the buff, McCree's range is still inferior to Hanzo and Widow, so on maps where they can find angles, they can win duels outside of his range. If not that, McCree's age-old weakness to multiple dive threats still exists. If the enemy only has one flanker, he's fine, but against full dive, he can struggle, particularly against Genji because, even though McCree has the stun to punish aggression, he also is immobile, so Genji can poke, outmaneuver and escape even if he's losing from range. This playstyle eventually awards Genji the win, as Blade is far better than High Noon. Also, aside from dive, because he rivals the lowest mobility in the game despite having the cooldown on his roll being reduced to 6 seconds, close range rushdown comps like 3 tank 3 support with a Brigita leading the charge will run him over. Despite it being assumed that Brigita excels versus flankers, she's good against McCree too, because her 500 health point shield can easily last until she closes the distance on him with her team. And with McCree's mobility still rivaling the worst in the game, he has no choice but to shoot the shields in front of him, and when forced to do so, you're better off with almost any other DPS in the game. May's biggest strengths are her wall, and if the player is good enough to hit her icicle shots, especially to the head. To make this hard for a good Mei player, will want to bring more ranged firepower or mobility. Hanzo, Farah and Widow should be able to play outside of her effective range to get picks on her or her team. If you're fast enough, Tracer and Genji can still work too, but beware of an icicle to the head when playing Tracer or getting frozen when too close as Genji. But if you dodge both of those situations, the flankers should be able to more easily poke her down from medium range as their weapons and agility are more direct. Winston is a good call for tanks as he can jump over the walls or escape her ultimate, and her damage isn't really high enough to scare him, especially as he can dance on the edge of his barrier to dodge her freeze and icicles. Wrecking Ball is misappropriatedly deemed weak to Mei, however good Wrecking Ball players will be able to engage in with big shields every fight, so even freezing him won't be enough to chew through 1000 plus HP, unless of course they also have a Reaper to pair with her. In general, the biggest thing to avoid is playing ground-based death ball comps, as her walls get the biggest value versus them when she splits them up. Because Mei's shots are unreliable, a hit scan like Soldier 76 will be favoured in a fair fight in open space. Also consider either mobility or Zarya bubbles to avoid her ult, but it rarely sees big value anyway these days unless your team comp is too slow. Farah. We've made many videos on this hero specifically because in previous metas she was much harder to deal with than she is currently, although the changes to her kit make her less of a long-range mid-air sniper and more of a in-the-fray bursting down type of hero. Farah counters Zarya Rein deathballs pretty hard, so always look for Diva and Winston to be your tanks as they can either jump into the air to contest her or move their damage denial abilities where needed quickly. Because her new rate of fire makes her more dangerous when in the fight hitting more directs, you'll have to adjust slightly to where she now likes to play from, as if you allow her to fight at this closer range, she might catch you out and secure a kill before you've been able to set up or react. McCree can counter Farah sometimes, however until he gets good ground and sightlines, she can easily outspam him and dive bomb him out of nowhere if the enemy controls the map, particularly now that she can shoot faster. McCree's damage will have less of a fall-off impact against her because of how much closer she needs to be to get value, but that's a two-way street. You need to be aware of how quickly she can land successive rockets to take you out. The new soldier spread does make him very effective against Farah, however, so much so that killing her can be considered one of his very few real strengths. She still moves pretty slow in the air, and tracking her with Soldier's Gun isn't that hard, but just like everyone else, you need to remember that her Conk Blast is up more often, so be careful where you choose to fight her. Generally speaking, Farah defending is far more powerful than Farah attacking, so also keep that in mind. If a soldier is retaking space, it can be impossible for him to ever see the Farah as he tries to peek out into her from a choke while his entire team is easily funneled, spammed by rockets and manipulated by Concussion Blast. To avoid this, you can send a Widow to take up key angles either far behind the action from a safe distance or on flanks to specifically surprise and deny Farah airspace, or often even better, take to the skies yourself with a Farah and pressure her air to air. If nothing else, this equalizes the airspace battle, which is crucially important when retaking ground versus a defensively set up Farah. And the last option is to play much faster on the ground, take mobility dive heroes like Tracer or Genji, or anything really fast with speed boost and zip past the Farah and try to kill her team faster than she can kill you. However, this style is harder now because Farah does shoot that much quicker. An unsung hero versus Farah is Sombra, who if your movement through the map is good enough, can even get high ground or toss the translocator high into the air to land a hack on her, which forces the Farah to fall to the ground. Also, unlike Soldier, Sombra's invis and mobility allows her to hunt the Farah, not the other way around, and despite a reduction in overall team damage, often flanking the Farah will produce better results than taking an obvious head-to-head aim duel. Ana is a great soft counter as well, because if her team affords her the ability to take shots at the Farah from range rather than play heal greedy, Ana's flexibility to play anti-air and then return to healing can often be stronger than the other slower hit scan options as her damage doesn't have fall off. Be aware as Ana though, as you scope in, you become a much easier target for Farah's new rate of fire to land successive hits on you. Reaper. There's two types of Reaper playstyles that can carry games. A tank busting Reaper who blows up the front line with his stellar close range spread damage, or sneaky Reaper who pounces out of nowhere to burst down a squishy. If you're losing the tank battle, recognize it requires teamwork to counter. As a tank, you have to outmaneuver him and run away, and call for your team to help when he's playing too aggressive onto you, focusing him away, forcing Wraith form, and hopefully bursting afterwards. He should be the #1 focus fire target in a brawl, as almost nothing will rival the amount of easily obtained damage he can dish out. Rein and Arisa have a lot of armor, and if they land their abilities perfectly, they can have a chance in a duel with proper footsie games. Remember to be more bold when your armor health is online, but try to use your barriers to block shots otherwise. Winston can dance on the edges of his bubble to dodge shots and then jump away. Roadhog potentially can win the duel with a hook, but the strongest tank versus Reaper is Diva, who can deny his damage with defense matrix, especially his ult, but more importantly frequently fly away from him. Beyond that, tanks need their DPS to handle him. Genji, McCree and Farah are best because they either punish his aggression with reflect or stun, or avoid his preferred battles completely and press a ranged advantage. Tracer as well can outplay him with superior damage at medium range, as well as vastly better mobility, but look out for clutch close range hits from shotguns. They can one-shot you if he aims well enough. Brigita can be okay, but with Wraith to escape the stun, Reaper is one of the few DPS that can reliably deal with Brig. Instead, we'd advise Lucio, who when played well will do more damage than he can at medium to longer ranges, and use the biggest counter of all, booping Reaper away from close range fights every few seconds, drastically reducing his ability to kill anything, but especially your tanks. Otherwise, all ranged heroes should be at an advantage depending on the map, but be sure to look out for sneaky Reaper flanks, because even McCree or Hanzo can easily fall if he catches them unaware. If Reaper is flanking too much, play more aggressively towards the enemy front line and push your backline closer to the fight so the rest of your team can more easily turn to help if he does flank. Raising the tempo will force his flank sooner, so you should still have cooldowns to dodge him and kill his team. Soldier. Soldier is a weaker hero currently despite his weapon spread buffs, but looks scariest when he successfully runs away from dives and typically has a mercy pocket amping up his damage to lethal levels. As mentioned in the previous section, he is now legitimately very strong against Farah, so if you're playing that hero, you do need to keep this in mind, as just swapping off and picking one of the many other options that are good against him can render him absolutely useless. The best answers are melee dive heroes like Wrecking Ball and Doomfist, who are unlikely to fall when pursuing him and have the tools to burst him down. Depending on your skill, Genji is favoured in the matchup in general, but you'll want to force out his healing station before you fully commit, unless he's low. Also, when Blade is online, he's an easy target. You can choose to duel him with Widow, Hanzo or McCree, who if you hit the skill shots can find the frag, but don't be stubborn, as Soldier is easier to play, has obnoxious head juke potential, and can self-heal. There's actually often no need to force a pure aim skill matchup. Another creative option would be to play an extra main tank, because he doesn't want to fight close up and needs to poke at medium range. If you put up an extra barrier on an objective, he'll have to waste a lot of time breaking it down before doing anything meaningful, so double main tank can beat him by ignoring him. Otherwise, he's typically spamming from high ground onto tanks. Any hero that can flank can catch him out. Tracer, Reaper, Sombra, dive tanks, etc. Sombra. Sombra's infinite invis has created a playstyle that can feel impossible to counter. Diva is the best hero to spam her primary fire at common movement paths to try and find an invis Sombra, and also, since she can fly and shoot at the same time, Diva can instantly chase her down and deny a hack if you quickly acquire the target. The other major counter is to play faster, because Sombra needs to set up, flank, and find hacks. Playing straightforwardly to rush down the enemy's frontline can win. For this playstyle, Reaper is good, but also because unless he's badly out of position, he doesn't mind being hacked most of the time, as he still keeps his passive lifesteal. This can work even better if you nano boost the Reaper prior to an EMP engage. Similarly, popping Zen's Transcendence early, or just as Sombra tries to EMP, can save your team while they don't have abilities, but remember, Zenyatta will die instantly to EMP if he fails to time this right, so this will require your team to escort you closer to the main fight rather than hanging back where Sombra can pounce you. Other things to keep in mind, Arisa is preferred to Rein in the mid fight because when hacked she keeps her barrier up, but both are useless versus EMP. Hanzo's recon arrow can be useful to scout out a hot travel path, McCree's stun at the ready to protect the backline can get value, and if nothing else, play a Sombra yourself with the intention of singling her out. Using your own Sombra invis defensively can quite easily stop her harassment as you pop out while she's trying to get a hack off and leave an enemy Sombra without escape options. Torbjorn's turret, although useless when EMP'd, can also punish her for jumping out of stealth behind you, and the armor helps your backline survive her flanks. Symmetra. Symmetra is so niche that when a good player hits you with her playstyle effectively, it can really catch you off guard. Her damage style shouldn't be a surprise. Like Junkrat, she can spam at range to do a surprising amount of damage. To beat her firepower, go vertical with Farah, or take angles with Widow or Hanzo. However, the scariest parts of Symmetra's kit aren't her main damage, it's her new and improved sentry turrets and mid-fight teleporter. The turrets are deceptively strong, with 30 HP dealing 50 DPS and slowing you down. You really don't want to get caught up on them with any hero, but immobile ones will suffer worse, just like against Junkrat spam, but it depends where she places replaces them. Having a Winston clear them out is typically the best call. Also, don't be afraid to use a mobility cooldown to quickly get to them and melee, which instantly removes them. As for the teleporter, the strongest aspect of it is what you can put into it. Thus far, Arisa and Bastion looks the strongest, as you can essentially recreate the pirate ship strat, but with the addition of space age teleport tech to bounce the Bastion into place quickly. Against a strat like this, or good use of the teleporter in general, make sure that you're not playing any type of comp / hero that is too slow. Having your own slow death ball or Arisa bunker will get destroyed by this mobility, which is what makes the comp so great on 2CP, where static bunker comps are still strong. To beat this, be sure to have the counters to whatever other threats the telly is bringing, typically a Bastion. You'll want a Diva to silence him while you engage, and a big damage hero like Reaper, Junkrat or Hanzo to find an angle on him. But the most important counter is positioning. You can't find yourself in a place that will get caught off by a swift teleport and survive, so stay in a universally safe spot until you've properly scouted how they're engaging with it, then attack. The strategy is typically run on attack, as defensive teams are often very immobile and the teleporter can exploit that. But if a team is running it on defense, make sure that your comp is building towards a guaranteed ult wipe, as the mid-fight clutch factor of a Symmetra can actually carry. Sombra EMP combined with Diva Bomb or Genji Blade can be the best, as they're unlikely to be able to dodge the stealth ult engage. Also, EMP brings down Symmetra's Photon Barrier ultimate. Torb. The new Torb is still strong against dive comps, as the turret feasts on small heroes that typically are difficult to hit but are very squishy. Plus it is much more maneuverable now too, as he can just cast it and continue fighting. Be very aware of Torb potentially throwing it down in awkward spots in the mid fight, sometimes even behind you as you come in. He doesn't generate armor packs anymore, so his value doesn't scale up in the same way. The turret also doesn't turn into a fight carrier when Torb ults. You do just have to contend with his new anti-armor space denial version. Because of this, don't overcompensate to counter the turret, as it's more of a middling ability now. I'd still say you want to press a ranged advantage with heroes like Farah or Hanzo, but you may need to also bring along some disable for his close range brawling pushes, making McCree to look like a pretty decent pick to whittle him down from medium range and pressure that turret. Anna's sleep will also be very key as well, as sleeping Torb during overload is massive value considering how important it is to his offense. Tracer. Brigita is the first hero we have to name, as her mere presence dethroned Tracer from being the strongest hero in the game. With a one-shot combo to kill her, an annoying shield to block her poke, an ult that renders her primary useless, Brigita earns her nickname of the Tracer Eraser on multiple fronts. Keep in mind, many Tracers may still be good enough to dodge your stun and poke effectively in the backline. Just be sure to at least land a flail or whip shot periodically on something to keep Inspire active, because when Tracer dodges your stun and keeps up poke pressure, as long as Inspire is active, Brig will be charging up Rally, which shuts her down completely. Remember though, Tracer can still pulse bomb you for a one-hit kill if you don't have rally armor. Other options if you don't want to pick Brigita are, wait, you're really not going to pick a Brig? I mean, it's a free win. Alright, maybe you already have a Brig. The other heroes that work are Lucio, who's quite the brawler in his own right. He can battle Tracer and with his self-heal almost be as tanky as Brigita in the matchup, but also peel for his flex support. Also Diva, with well-timed bursts of defense matrix, can eat a few clips of Tracer's pistols and even nab her pulse bomb. After you force a recall, swooping in with your thrusters and micro missiles can secure the kill. Sure, you can pick McCree, Hog or Torbjorn, but they are more easily outplayed. So instead, take Brig no matter what you're swapping off to do so, because you should force a swap if not win outright because of it. Widow. Wrecking Ball is the perfect solution to hunt down a Widowmaker. With speed and burst, it's everything you need. Short of that, more tanks always works. Triple tank dive will make it nearly impossible for Widow to set up, but even 3 or 4 tank deathball comps will be far too much meat for a Widow who isn't pro to burst through. If that's too cheesy for you, the mirror match is often required, as not many DPS can simply shut her down from getting value. Sure, they can flank her, but with infinite range, she can get value from anywhere and may do so before a flank comes in. Genji is the best pick to flank her, as he has the verticality to quickly get to where she likes to play and can reflect to punish an overeager shot or even just clear a sightline as he closes the distance. In most cases, Widow counters Farah. However, on some maps, you should consider it the other way around, if there is sufficient cover for her to avoid sightlines and close the distance. Permanent Invis Sombra now can guarantee a flank on her to shoot her in the back, but be careful because clutch heals can more easily nullify your damage than the other counters suggested. The last thing to remember is that your entire team has to change the way you play to respect the Widow's sightlines to avoid being shot in the head. That is actually an acquired skill, but crucial to avoid her taking over the game. Mercy is also heavily suggested as she can res a pickoff, but she also heavily supports the Widow mirror matchup, as if your Widow has damage amp and the other Widow doesn't, your Widow is allowed to peek much faster and fire much sooner for lethal damage, which is all the difference in the duel. duel. Ana. With the combo of Ana being meta right now and Brigita being so good, backlines are more stable than they've ever been. Even up against the strongest dive heroes currently, Ana has the potential to sleep or anti-nade them, drastically decreasing their impact. Of course, Hanzo or Widow headshots may do the trick, but Ana often can avoid their main sightlines. So with that being the case, the main way to stop an Ana is to either bait out her abilities for a dive or get more value than she gets into the frontline fight. Some tactics to consider: using Wrecking Ball with a big adaptive shield to face tank key ability cooldowns to set up for a secondary dive to come afterward without anti-nade available. Or as Winston, try to dive behind her, booping her towards that action and also making it harder for her to hit a sleep on you. The Sombra Doomfist duo can work as well. If Sombra can land the hack, then Doom can finish off the kill with a punch. Or Genji for that matter with a swift strike. But more times than not, this may prove to be too elaborate. It's typically far easier, rather than targeting the Ana, to knock her main tank around with Doomfist or Wrecking Ball, to set up your own Ana's anti-nade, or even consider using a Winston bubble not to dive at her, but to block off a key line of sight while you focus the front line. Things to remember: Lucio can help your team close the distance to overwhelm Ana, Zarya can cleanse a teammate from anti-nade, and Ana is weaker to graviton than supports with better defensive ults. Brigita. There's a few keys to countering Brigita: superior melee damage or debuff support utility. A Discord orb cast on her will let your Winston zap her down, just as well if your Ana hits an anti-nade. Creating that opportunity though is the tricky part, which is why the melee divers Wrecking Ball or Doomfist are best, even if you might think they're weak to getting stunned. Pile Driver or Rocket Punch deal big damage that she can't block, and once she's injured, she's much easier to focus down with a bit of help. Wrecking Ball is particularly underrated versus Brigita, as he can fly into the sky, can pop his shield mid-air safely, then Pile Driver down for 100 damage, popping Brig up into the air to be focused down, and with his added health doesn't even mind getting stunned. The other option is to pressure her from range. However, the small barrier is often too hard for your team to focus, and spending firepower on her shield opens opportunities for her team to fire at you instead. Remember, Brig doesn't do much in between her cooldowns, so simply holding the shield on the objective is value until she gets her next stun. So unless you have some serious firepower, like a Bastion for example, expecting to win the shield break war against a Brig is folly, because you can't forget she's adding a mini main shield from the support position, and unless the enemy's comp is very bad, they probably have another real main tank to cycle the shielding in your way. You may try to Junkrat or Hanzo against Brig, but you'll more than likely be required to flank to get value. Farah is currently fairly good as well, and she looks to be even better with the rate of fire buff, as although her splash damage is reduced, firing down on slow targets is easy, so Brigita and Goat's comp should be even weaker to Farah than it previously was, assuming the Farah can hit multiple directs in a row. Lucio. Solid Lucio play can carry the team aspect of the game, whether with speed or Reddit Lucio shenanigans, winning odd duels against Widowmakers or booping tanks off the map. Lucio is the Genji of supports and can pull off some wacky plays while still returning to peel for his team in time if his movement is good enough, so don't take him lightly. On some maps, like Lijiang Gardens, if you don't have a Lucio, you nearly outright lose immediately, as you'll be forced to cross the bridge into the enemy, who thanks to their speed boost will already be set up defensively and can now set up to boop you off. In some cases, you simply need a Lucio of your own to compete with the repositioning and aggro he permits. Otherwise, the single best answer is Sombra, whose hack makes him a potato, and Imp does that as well as destroying the shields from sound barrier instantly. When a Lucio player is good enough, you often can't afford to focus him with anything, or else he can scurry away with self-heal and wall bounces while his team is surrounding you. But if you do feel the need to counter him directly, Roadhog is a fun choice to punish Reddit Lucios if you can hit that hook. Diva as well has the mobility and forgiving firepower to blast him and stay on target as he tries to escape. Mercy. Mercy is in her weakest state than we've seen in over a year, not just with her own nerfs, but with the state of the meta. With Sombra being strong, Mercy's ability to fly to dodge incoming dives feels outdated, because Mercy is doomed to be defenseless against a permanent invis Sombra flank or a hack. Another problem is, with her healing value so low in comparison to Ana, you often don't have to focus her at all, just simply pump more team damage and Ana nades into the enemy's front line, and you'll outvalue her mid-fight unless she gets a res off, and even then, it's often too late. Mercy's highest value is if you attempt to chase her and fail, effectively eating cooldowns and ammo, making space for the rest of her team to land meaningful damage. Sombra is the best single answer, as she can do little to stop the hack, but short of that, make sure that whatever mobility heroes that are chasing her keep consistently hitting her, as even a Diva cannon from long distance for 1 damage can deny her self-heal from activating. Moira. Moira is probably the weakest support right now because all she does is heal, so as soon as you land an anti-nade, her value plummets. So Ana is the best counter. Sombra Doomfists are quite strong versus her as well. Punch, hack, and EMP cancels her ult, and despite having fade on a short cooldown, it's not as powerful a deterrent from Doomfist's aggression as a sleep dart can be. Genji, although he struggles to outright fight her 1v1, farms her with Dragon Blade, especially when she's locked in her ult. Winston Bubble now blocks her healing, Diva can eat her orbs, and Wrecking Ball is actually very likely to exploit some weaknesses weaknesses in the backline because if you're playing Moira, you're likely missing Ana's sleep or Lucio's speed, allowing him to play more aggressive. Widow and Hanzo are also good versus Moira as their damage burst is so high that the big sustain heals don't get value. Zenyatta. Zenyatta has fallen a bit in favour because he's such an exploitable glass cannon, and unlike Ana, Zen has no dive response bar hitting insane shots on his pursuers. Wrecking Ball and Doomfist can practically sneeze on a Zen to kill him if they successfully roll onto him without being punished. Ana's anti-nade denies his trance, and her healing and sleeps dwarf his output right now. Beyond all that, Zen is a bit awkward in the current meta because if you're picking him, you're likely not going to have either a Lucio or an Ana. Ana Zen is the most common pairing, but that backline is very easy to dive and split apart without the speed boost to reposition, so Wrecking Ball or Winston Diva Genji will more or less eat it alive. Pharmacy also loves slow moving targets to shoot at. Lucio Zen is probably the strongest combo, but it's so low healing hardly anyone will give it a chance in ranked, but if you do run against it, note that it is the highest damage output comp in the game, so you have to react fast to not get run over. If you play too slow, mobility threats can indeed carry the entire game still, even if you play Brig, because Discord plus mobility focus fire is still incredible. To counter this old school dive comp style of play, you either have to send successful flanks at the enemy Zenyatta, or more quickly fight head up duels against anything that you can lock down, be it the front line or a Genji, as they won't have enough heals to protect from focus fire. The simplest version of this is to play 3 support with a Lucio Brigita and rush down anything with a stun to sustain. If they dodge the stuns, you'll simply have to outvalue them in duels, whether with sleep darts or other mid-fight abilities. And that's it everyone, hopefully this video will be useful to you. Things will obviously be subject to change if the meta shifts wildly in the future, but this video has something for everybody, so no matter what hero is driving you crazy in Overwatch, you should be better prepared now than you were before. If you enjoyed this, please do leave a rating, it really helps us out. If you never want to miss another video of ours again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad, you'll be in great company. And finally, please follow the Your Overwatch Twitter, it's where you can find updates about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump, and until next time.